Welcome back, everyone. Tonight, we have a pretty terrifying experience shared by a man in Hong Kong. This incident happened while he was riding the MTR one night. A quick note before we jump in. A lot of you have reached out asking if I could talk more about some of the beliefs that pop up in these stories, especially for those of you who aren't as familiar with Chinese spiritual traditions. It can feel a little mysterious or even confusing when things like Yum An, known in the West as third eye, comes up. So here's how we're going to do it tonight. First, we're going to dive into tonight's ghost story. After that, I'll take a few minutes to go deeper into the cultural side of things. If you've ever wondered why some people can see ghosts and most of us can't, or what it really means to have Yum An, I'll be breaking that down right after the story. So stick around. I think you'll find it fascinating. Alright, so let us dive in. Have you ever heard of a haunting in the MTR? That's Hong Kong's subway system. Unlike New York's MTA, which runs 24/7, the MTR shuts down each night, usually around midnight, depending on the line. After that, it's closed until the next morning. This story comes from a man living in Hong Kong. He shared this experience from a few years ago, and it left a lasting impression on everyone who's heard it. Let's call him Albert. Albert claims to have Yum An, the third eye. It's rare, but it's not unheard of in Hong Kong. Albert's had this ability ever since he was a little boy. It's believed that most children are able to see spirits up to the age of 6 through 8 years old, whether they know it or not. This age is said to be the transition period to when they start losing the ability. By age 10, most children have already lost the ability entirely. The exception are people with Yum An. Albert used to see spirits a lot more when he was younger. Now that he's older, the sightings still happen, just not as often. These days, it's more occasional, but they do still show up, especially during certain times of the year. He added that most of the time, it's actually pretty difficult differentiating if what he sees is a spirit or a person, because not all ghosts are like what we see in the movies. They don't just float up to you and scare you. Most of the time, it's much more subtle, as they usually keep to themselves. They look like regular people, doing regular things. You won't really know unless you really look closely at what they're doing. That's when you'll start noticing that something might be off. This is why I mentioned earlier that children sometimes don't even know they have this ability, because unless the spirit they see really sticks out to them, it's very easy to mistake the spirit for just another person in a crowd of people. Albert was 30 years old when the strange event happened to him in July, years ago. He worked in finance at the time, the kind of job where late nights aren't uncommon, especially when a deadline is coming up. At this time, his company was rushing to finish a new project, so for nearly a week straight, Albert found himself clocking out well past 11:30 p.m. That meant catching the very last or close to the last train home before the MTR shut down for the night. He always boarded at Yamade Station. Back then, it was the last stop on the Green Line. It's not anymore, they've since extended it, but at the time, it was the end of the line. This night was no different. Albert stepped into the end car and took his usual seat. One of those end spots near the glass panel. He liked leaning his shoulder against it during the ride. It was late, and as expected, the train was nearly empty. Maybe 5 or 6 other passengers scattered across the car he was in. As the doors closed and the train began to move, Albert leaned into the glass and let his mind drift as he started to unwind from the long day of work. That's when he noticed her, a young woman standing at the far corner of the car, right next to the door. She had her head down and she was wearing a red windbreaker. He couldn't see her face, just the top of her head and the way she just stood there, completely still. His first thought was maybe she was just dozing off, but then he glanced around. The car had plenty of empty seats, so why was she just standing there? He didn't think much of it at the time, other than it was a bit weird she chose to stand rather than sit, when the train was basically empty. The next night, Albert worked late again. This time, he almost didn't make the last train. He was sprinting through the station, tie loose, laptop bag bouncing at his side. The moment he stepped in through the doors, they closed shut behind him, cutting it close. Breathing heavily, he made his way through the nearly empty cars to his usual seat, that familiar end spot by the glass panel at the end of the train. He sat down, exhaled, and wiped the sweat off his forehead. That's when he saw her again. Same girl, same spot. She was standing in the same exact position as the night before, in the corner by the door, head tilted downward, motionless, still wearing the same red windbreaker. She was not browsing on her phone, not looking around, not even shifting her weight, just standing there. Now, that's when it started to feel a little off. So that night, Albert made a quiet decision. He was going to keep an eye on her, just to see where she got off. During the ride, Albert kept stealing glances at her, just subtle shifts of the eyes trying not to be obvious, but she didn't move. The entire ride, she stayed in the same exact position, head down, hands at her sides, like she was frozen in place. Passengers got on and off at random stops, but not a single person seemed to acknowledge her. It was like she wasn't even there. No one brushed past her, no one gave her a second look. Finally, the train reached the last station, end of the line. Everyone had to get off. Albert stood and kept his eyes on her as best as he could. He saw her step off the train, but by the time he got out himself, she was gone. Now at this point, Albert still didn't think anything paranormal was going on. He figured he just lost her in the shuffle. It was late, people were tired, and she must have slipped into the crowd. That's what he told himself. Until the third night. Same time, same routine. Albert got on the train and headed straight to his usual seat at the end, next to the glass panel. But tonight, the girl wasn't there. Maybe she didn't work late tonight, he thought. No big deal. Exhausted from the week, Albert leaned his head against the glass, shut his eyes, and took a little nap. 2 stops passed. The sound of shuffling feet, passengers getting off, stirred him awake. It was mostly people leaving the train now. Very few were getting on. He rubbed his eyes and glanced around. That's when he noticed a couple sitting across from him. His side of the row was completely empty, just him. The train then slipped into one of the dark tunnels, and that's when he saw it. In the reflection on the glass, Albert saw himself sitting there, but he also saw someone else sitting next to him. A woman. She was in the seat directly to his left, head turning toward him, smiling. Albert froze. He quickly turned his head to the left. The seat was empty. He looked back in the reflection. She was still there. Same posture, same smile, still staring straight at him. And then, her mouth slowly began to open, wider and wider, until an impossibly long tongue slid out, curling slightly at the end. It wasn't human. No way. No one's tongue should be that long. And that's when Albert knew this wasn't his imagination. He was really seeing something again, even if it was only through the reflection this time. He didn't react, just looked downward, pretending like he didn't see anything. Maybe his body language gave something away because the couple across from him, they noticed his sudden change in demeanor. The woman nudged her partner. Both of them glanced at Albert and then at each other. And then, without saying a word, they stood up and quietly walked out of the car into the next one, similar to what most people do when they see a crazy person on the subway. Suddenly, Albert felt the left side of his face go numb. He turned slowly to the window, heart thudding in his chest, and in the reflection, he saw it. Her tongue was resting against his cheek. She hadn't moved an inch in the reflection, still sitting there beside him, smiling, but now Her long, unnatural tongue was pressed right against his face. Albert felt a wave of dread crash over him. He wanted to cry. He wanted to stand up and just run to get as far away as possible. But his legs wouldn't move. It was like they didn't belong to him anymore. Completely frozen. So he did the only thing he could. He shut his eyes. He couldn't bear to look anymore. About a minute passed. Felt like forever. Then, the train pulled up into Gaolongtong, one of the bigger interchange stations. More passengers began to board. Normal people, chatting quietly, scrolling on their phones. Albert slowly opened his eyes. They were out of the tunnel now, so the reflection in the window was faint, but still visible. She was gone. He looked around quickly, scanning the car. Nothing. No one strange, no one sitting beside him. Everyone who got on looked normal. And then he saw her. In the far corner of the car, same spot from the first 2 nights, was the girl in the red windbreaker. Head bowed, standing still, just like the last 2 days. Albert stared. There's one question that Albert still never figured out to this day. Was it the same spirit as the one who sat next to him and licked his face? The one who sat beside him was wearing different clothes, but could it be the same entity, or were there 2 separate entities that night? He never figured this out, but he feels like they were not the same entity. The train eventually rolled into the final station, where everyone had to get off and transfer to the opposite platform. Albert stood up, so did the others. He shuffled toward the door, but glanced back. The girl? She was still standing in there. She wasn't getting off. And then, as if sensing his gaze, she began to slowly raise her head. Albert immediately turned away. He didn't wait to see her face, because deep down, he knew he shouldn't look. The next morning, Albert noticed something strange. The left side of his face, the same spot where he felt the numbness the night before, had broken out into a rash. It wasn't severe at first, just some redness and irritation. But no matter what creams or ointments he tried, it stuck around. It took him a full month to get it resolved. But after that night, Albert stopped sitting in his usual spot. Anytime he had to work late and catch the last train home, he made sure to pick a car with more people in it. He stayed near the middle of the train. So, what do you guys think happened here to Albert? Was he just working so much that he was seeing things on the train? Or do you think the girl in the red was a lingering spirit? What about the one that sat next to him with the long tongue? Do you think they were the same spirit, or did he come across 2 different spirits that night? Let us know what you think in the comments below. Alright, now as I promised, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the beliefs surrounding the third eye in Chinese culture. First of all, what does Yum-Yong-An even translate to in English? Literal translation is yin-yang eyes, which means the ability to see both worlds, the living, yang, as well as the world of the dead, yum, meaning people with these eyes can see ghosts, spirits, or even in some cases, other supernatural beings that were never human to begin with. It's like having a permanent sixth sense. The thing with these eyes is that it's not always active, but it's always present, meaning the person doesn't constantly see spirits 24/7. It goes a lot deeper than that. People with Yum-Yong-An carry the ability to see into the world of the dead at all times, but what they see and how clearly they can see it depends on many other factors. Even among people with these eyes, the intensity and clarity of how they perceive the spirits ranges from person to person, and it's dependent on a bunch of other factors as well. According to belief, there are said to be different levels or types of vision among people with Yum-Yong-An. These can be broken down into 5 main categories, but it doesn't mean that you are either one or the other. It can be a mixture of all of these, depending on the situation and the person. The first one is visual sight. This one is the most rare. It's full-body apparitions that look like people. Spirits are often indistinguishable from the living until something gives it away. For example, no shadow, no reflection, strange clothing, or the vacant, frozen expression. People in this category only realize something is off after something unexplainable happens, like the figure vanishing into thin air. Then, there's number 2, reflected sight. People in this category of Yamyurang report sightings as more common in mirrors, glass, water surfaces, or any reflective surface, such as metal. So a spirit only appears when reflected, but not directly. Number 3 is peripheral sight. This is when the person sees a shadowy figure, but it's always at the corner of their eye. But when they turn to look at it directly, it's gone. Number 4 is energetic sensitivity. This is the feeling of being watched, sensing cold spots or sudden pressure, or feeling nausea when entering certain places. Many believe this is a more passive form of Yamyurang, as it's more feeling than seeing. And then, there's number 5, dream sight, or sleep paralysis. Some people only see spirits in dreams or during episodes of sleep paralysis. In Chinese culture, these are considered real encounters, not imagination. The dream world is seen as a bridge between yin and yang. The intensity of sightings also has factors that affect it. Here are a few examples. The time of the year. During spirit-heavy festivals like Qingming, which is Tomb Sweeping Festival, and Yulanji, which is Hungry Ghost Month. You may already remember this one from some of my prior episodes, but during these 2 times of year, the veil between the world of the living and the dead are considered thinner. So those with Yamyurang often report stronger and more frequent encounters during these periods. Then there's also location. Certain places, like hospitals or abandoned buildings, funeral parlors, old trees, stairwells, or MTR tunnels, are also believed to be places with higher amounts of yamhei. The stronger the yamhei, the more visible these spirits become to them. Yamhei could be described as negative energy. Then there's physical and emotional state. If a person is sick, weak, or emotionally drained, they're said to be more susceptible to seeing spirits. Their yang energy, which is another word for their life force, is lower, making it easier for spirits to approach or be seen. And then there's age. Many say that this ability is stronger in childhood and gradually dulls with age, unless the person has really strong yum connection or spiritual sensitivity. These eyes aren't like a light switch that's permanently on. It's more like a sensor. There are conditions that can heighten or trigger the ability, but the sensitivity is always there in the background. For many who claim to have Yamyurang, they also share that seeing spirits isn't constant. It's unpredictable. They never know when something will appear or how intense it will be, and that's part of what makes it so terrifying. Imagine walking into a normal, crowded area with a lot of people, and out of nowhere, realizing someone on the platform has no feet, or that one of the people in the crowd has a gray, hollow face, and no one else seems to notice this. These aren't always dramatic, full-body apparitions. Sometimes it's glimpses, distortions, or just subtle details that feel wrong. So can people with these eyes just turn it off? The simple answer is no. In most traditional beliefs, people with Yamyurang can't just turn it off whenever they want to, but they can learn how to manage it, either through religious practices, spiritual mentorship, or just avoidance behaviors. Some people learn to dull their sensitivity. Some even stop seeing anything for years, but many report that it returns when they're sick or emotionally weak. So if you're Chinese, most likely you've heard growing up that if you ever do happen to see a spirit, it's usually better to pretend like you didn't see them at all. Most people that do have Yamyurang very often agree on this as well, as it's a pretty consistent theme you'll hear in Asia, that you should never let a random spirit know you can see them. Do you know why that is? Because in Chinese and Hong Kong folklore, once a spirit knows you can see them, there's a bigger chance they might follow you, or worse, cling to you. Many people that do have Yamyurang are taught, often from childhood, to just act normal when they do see something strange. Don't stare and don't react. Also, don't speak. Just look away and carry on. It's not about fear. It's because if the spirit does end up following you, it's most likely because they want something. They might need help finishing unresolved business, a final prayer or ritual to pass on, or simply to be noticed. In more serious cases, they may even attach themselves to someone with weaker yang energy. We can probably spend hours diving even deeper into this topic, but this is pretty much a quick breakdown of the basics of what Yamyurang really is. I hope you all found this as interesting as I did. Until we meet again next week for more scary stories from Asia.